Earlier today, House Republicans released another report on the withdrawal from Afghanistan that they swear was not meant to be politically partisan, even though it obviously was, and the Trump supporters at the Fox Propaganda Network decided to run with it. But unfortunately for them, liberal Fox News commentator Jessica Tarlov was on hand to give out some very important fact checks, and we have to talk about it. But before we do, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, friends, we have several clips to talk about in this video. As you know, here at Pondering Politics, we talk quite a bit about the withdrawal from Afghanistan for a few reasons. Number one, it was a major foreign policy event in America's history. It was a major event in terms of America's military history because Afghanistan was the longest war in American history. It was also a turning point for the Biden administration. Unfortunately, President Biden did the right thing, did the thing that Americans wanted correctly, which is to get out of Afghanistan. But because of the nature of the withdrawal and the fact that it was nowhere near as smooth as we wish it would have been, and 13 U.S. service people did indeed die, it was a turning point for President Biden's popularity, and it was the beginning of the end of his high approval rating. It's also been weaponized in bad faith by Trump supporters and MAGA Republicans in ways which I find infuriating. So we're going to play this clip on that subject of Jessica Tarlov, Fox News liberal, responding to the bad faith weaponization of the Afghanistan withdrawal by her four MAGA co-hosts. And she hands out a couple of fact checks that we're going to expound upon.
So where do you stand on this absolute catastrophe that your party is responsible for?
I stand nowhere near that vantage point on this, at least in terms of the timing issue. So I think that the Republicans on the Foreign Affairs Committee would be a lot better served if they had let Democrats participate in the creation of this at all. So Gregory Meeks, who's the ranking Democrat on the committee, said they weren't invited to participate. They weren't even shown a draft copy before it was released. And the timing of that, obviously, with an election coming up, makes it quite clear that they want Donald Trump to look like the good foreign policy guy and for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, by extension, to look like an idiot. And the problem for Trump is that he has people even like McMaster, who has a new book out, has been doing a lot of interviews, and someone who's actually defended Trump a lot, saying plainly and clearly on television that Trump bears some responsibility for this. Not all of the responsibility, but some responsibility because of the February 2020 negotiations that ended up releasing 5,000 Taliban prisoners, which included terrorists. Donald Trump never wants to talk about that. That was his deal. He was even going to invite them to Camp David. And there's a new ad out today from the Harris campaign about Trump on national security. And it has all of these people who worked for him, like Mark Esper and John Bolton, talking about how he is not fit to serve, that he idolizes dictators, that he is.
It's a great point. We talked about that particular ad, ironically, in a previous videos before I saw this from Jessica Tarlov, and you should definitely check that particular ad out. I also want to bring up the references to national security advisors. We're going to play one that she name dropped specifically, H.R. McMaster, who was one of Donald Trump's national security advisors, and he was recently giving interviews and hawking a book. And listen, to be clear, this is not a rhino, right? This is a guy who still likes a lot of what Donald Trump sold and was trying to sell. He's no darling of the left. He's not even endorsing Vice President Kamala Harris. But even he was very clear within his capacity as a national security advisor that this idea that Trump doesn't have any responsibility for the withdrawal of Afghanistan is ridiculous.
But Trump had his hand on, does Trump bear part of the responsibility for what happened?
Oh, yes. So the whole premise of talking to the Taliban before you leave Afghanistan, why the heck were we even doing that?
He was going to invite them to Camp David.
Right. Even the Obama administration, when they made the mistake of pulling all of our troops out of Iraq in 2010, which really set conditions for the rise of ISIS and so forth by 2014, the Obama administration didn't negotiate with al-Qaeda in Iraq on the way out.
Right. So even H.R. McMaster says the simple predicate, the deal that the Taliban made, that Donald Trump made with the Taliban itself was a major factor in what happened. And I wanted to bring this up while I had that clip of H.R. McMaster, because it occurs to me, another Trump national security advisor, John Bolton, said basically the same thing and also went out of his way to debunk the right-wing myth that Donald Trump had nothing to do with the the Afghanistan withdrawal, that he was blameless in the affair. Again, this is another Trump Republican national security advisor correcting the record.
You know what made us less safe,
make us
Ambassador?
safer, right.
You know what made us less safe is when Biden pulled us out of Afghanistan. 13 Americans died, and now
That was Trump's deal.
And now
That
the
was Trump's deal.
Taliban tells us back off, don't kill Al Qaeda.
That's right.
Are you out of your mind, sir?
Same thing they would
Are
have
you
done
out of
under
your
Donald
mind?
Trump. No.
Oh, come on.
Who cut the deal, Eric? Who cut the deal?
Who delivered the deal?
Donald
Biden
Trump cut the
delivered
deal, didn't
No,
he?
no. Trump wanted
What would
a
Trump have
smooth-
done?
He
What
wanted to
would
leave
Trump have done
2,500
had he
people
been
there.
reelected?
Remember, sir?
So this goes to show what happens when MAGA Trump supporters are confronted by other Trump supporters who happen to be more reasonable. Again, Bolton and McMaster faithfully served Trump, wanted him to succeed, and they've been critical of him, yes, but they are also staunchly critical of President Biden and Vice President Harris. Neither of them, neither McMaster or Bolton, are voting or endorsing the Democrats, including Harris. So again, they're never Trump Republicans. It's absolute nonsense. But they're correct. Donald Trump cut the damn deal. And we'll get again into the details more, but I just really want to drive this home. This is Michael McCaul, who is the chairman of the Republican-led House Foreign Affairs Committee, who presided over the publishing of that report. And even he admits, albeit reluctantly, that Donald Trump played a role in the withdrawal from Afghanistan, and Trump made mistakes. He does not want to volunteer this, but he has asked pointed questions and is at least honorable enough to admit somewhat of the truth that Trump bears responsibility for what happened in Afghanistan.
HKI being the airport, I want to ask you, though, 11 Marines, one sailor and one soldier lost their lives at Abbey Gate when that suicide bomber detonated. On Tuesday, the Speaker of the House is presenting an award to the family members of the fallen. That's also debate day. I think you would agree. All Gold Star families need to be respected in this country. More than 2,400 Americans were killed in Afghanistan, 45 combat deaths under Donald Trump. Why aren't all of them being honored? Why only these 13?
Well, this was one of the deadliest days in Afghanistan. It could have been prevented if the State Department did its job by law and executed the plan of evacuation. They did not do that until the day the Taliban invaded.
So, and we'll get to another part of that particular clip, but see how he tries at first to make it partisan, even though the host of Face the Nation, Margaret Brennan, points out, like, listen, there's no rank among Gold Star families. Like, it's not like one Gold Star family matters more than another. So if we're going to honor and respect all of them, why on earth are we only honoring and respecting the ones that are politically expedient to you, the 13 that died on President Biden's watch, for which he bears command responsibility? But 45 died on Donald Trump's watch, so more U.S. troops died on Trump's watch, but you don't seem to care about that. And he doesn't really have a satisfying answer. However, Margaret Brennan also pushes the issue again on the other mistakes that Trump made.
Of it being on the same date as the debate. That was not a coordinated effort.
Really?
To my knowledge, it was not.
General McKenzie, who was the CENTCOM commander in 2021, said the Trump-era Doha agreement was one of the worst negotiating mistakes ever made by the United States. It was the operational mechanism that killed Afghanistan, that destroyed the government of Afghanistan. Did you identify mistakes by the Trump administration?
Well, we identified Zal Khalilzad. The mistake here with
The negotiator.
with Doha was the fact that he negotiates with the Taliban and leaves out the Afghan government.
Right.
That was a slap in the face to them, and it was not good for morale.
So even Michael McCaul, the Republican chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee that wrote this incredibly partisan report of the Afghanistan withdrawal, trying to pin it all on Vice President Harris even though the interviews only mentioned her a handful of times, the final report, now that she's the presumptive Democratic nominee, mentioned her hundreds of times because, again, it's now a partisan political issue. Even he admits that Trump does bear some responsibility responsibility for this, even though he is reluctant to do so. Again, just really want to drive this home because it's so damn important. And I know those of you watching have relatives and friends and loved ones who genuinely believe for some reason that Donald Trump is perfect and blameless in all of this, and think that President Biden and Vice President Harris, either with malice or total incompetence, made every single mistake possible. The truth is very different.
All right, joining me now is retired Army Brigadier General Steve Anderson. He is one of these 10 senior military personnel who signed on to this letter backing Harris. General, I'm so grateful to have you on this morning.
Thank you.
So, of course, we're expecting today this report on the Afghanistan withdrawal from Congress to come and criticize President Biden here. Can you explain why you are defending Kamala Harris? Because obviously that was a very difficult day, and we lost 13 brave Americans as that final withdrawal was happening. Tell us your view of Kamala Harris's role in that and kind of why you view her as the right person to lead.
Well, thank you, Casey. I was in Afghanistan 2016 to 2018, so I saw firsthand the disaster of Donald Trump's leadership in Afghanistan. He had 4 years to fix it and to get us out of Afghanistan, and he didn't. And he absolutely set conditions for the things that happened to happen. For instance, he negotiated directly with the Taliban. He cut the Afghanistan government out of it. You would never do that. I mean, this is the guy that wrote The Art of the Deal, but yet one of the key players he didn't even talk to. He negotiated for the release of 5,000 Taliban fighters that have come back to haunt us now. And, everything that he did, try to set conditions to make this happen, he left an absolute mess. He also established a timeline. And that's something you would never do in a military negotiation. You establish your conditions-based, not date-based. So the entire thing was a mess. So I think Kamala Harris and President Biden did the best they could do, and they were handed an absolute disaster. And I feel that the Afghanistan withdrawal perhaps could have been done better, but in light of the conditions that were set by Donald Trump, we saw what happened.
So that's a really compelling argument against a nuanced argument. He even makes room as a Biden-Harris, Walls supporter that there are things to criticize about the Biden administration. I am totally fine with that as well. This idea that no one here is suggesting that mistakes weren't made under the Biden administration. What is being said, however, is that the conditions were set by Trump for disaster. Biden was handed a very difficult situation for which would be impossible to play it perfectly. This idea that he could have renegotiated a new deal is ridiculous, given that the Taliban had no interest in renegotiating deals. The U.S. government made a commitment under Trump. They don't care that Biden is the new president. A commitment's a commitment. All of the experts that testified, because, by the way, the Democrats in the minority on the House Foreign Affairs Committee also released their own version, their own report, in which they talk about this. The experts, the people, questioned in the course of this investigation, admitted that if President Biden attempted to deviate meaningfully from Trump's deal, the Taliban would have shot at U.S. troops. We would have been in another hot war with the Taliban. That is the circumstance. Those are the conditions left by Trump for Biden. Nobody could handle that perfectly. Nobody. And even the mistakes that were made by the Biden administration, many of them were at least sound in logic, even if in hindsight we can say, well, maybe we should have done something different. I encourage you definitely check out the full report. It goes into the details that Donald Trump set a date certain. He also, even though he said it was conditions-based, that the Taliban did not honor the conditions that the United States imposed on them because Trump didn't enforce the deal. Trump continued to retrograde, to reduce U.S. forces, despite the fact that the Taliban did not honor their conditions, did not honor their part of the deal. Trump honored all of his, ironically, with the Taliban of all people, but the Taliban did not honor their part of the deal, and Trump did it anyway. It just goes into vivid details that totally undermine the Republican narrative. And again, it makes room. It says, listen, there are things to criticize about the Biden administration and decisions that were made. But this idea that Trump handled it perfectly, Biden botched the whole thing, or that Trump made a terrible deal that Biden could have snapped his fingers and corrected, therefore it's on Biden for not having done that, is totally ridiculous and morally irresponsible and just militarily unsound. So Republicans will continue to make hay out of it. Donald Trump might even mention it. I expect he will at tomorrow's debate. And I hope the vice president is prepared to refute his bad faith, dishonest talking points and remind the American people that to the extent that the Afghanistan withdrawal was chaotic, Donald Trump helped set the stage for that and, per usual, kicked the can down the road and handed off the responsibility to other people to clean up his mess. So again, we'll probably talk about this more, I expect. But in the meantime, great performance by Jessica Tarlov, reminding people and Fox viewers and her MAGA co-hosts of the fact checks that they definitely didn't want to hear. In the meantime, you let me know what you think in the comments.